We're smooth, 98.1 FM. Good morning and welcome to Lagos Talks 981. It's gone exactly 2 minutes past the hour of 9 o'clock. It's a Tuesday, 21st of May, 2024, and it's time for us to talk everything related to power this morning. Power, let there be light, and there was light from the morning of creation, but it would appear that when eventually the echoes of the words got to a certain corner in the western part of the sub-Saharan Africa, it became certainly not connecting in a way. It seemed like it's still darkness and it's still morning yet uncreated in that part of the world. Now, call the power sector of Nigeria that glutton that keeps asking for more. You will not be wrong. Call it that dead horse that you get to flog, it will never want to just even as much as even recognize or even twitch a bit. That's still it. So how come having sunk in so much into it, but so much darkness around? What could be the eclipse around Nigeria's power sector that defies every ambience of light penetrating through it, no matter how much you spend? Over 10 billion spent so far, and still more being asked for. Even dismantle the body and say you call it different entity, unbundle what it is. It bundles all back up again, and it seemed like there is no solution in sight. But let's see how we can unpack this and see what the band you fall into as we invite Uade Ahimie to help us get a better understanding of the past situation in Nigeria this morning. So, Uade, good morning to you.
Good morning, Omatseye. Great to be here. Your analysis was extremely apt, but I think there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, just a quick one before we dig into it. The light at the end of a tunnel most times might be that of an oncoming train, high speed.
Omatseye, yeah. But let's be positive. Positivity.
Okay. Nice to have you get us into this. So let's get the power sector in Nigeria in general. Where are we and where are we heading from here, please?
Like I always like to start when I talk about power. Power is not cheap. It's become my regular phrase so that people can better understand the fact that it costs money to generate power, it costs money to transmit power, it costs money to distribute power. However, someone has to pay for the power. And who has to pay for that power? The consumer. And if the consumer is not paying, your generation, your transmission, every other thing is going to be lackluster, and which I think is what has happened over time in Nigeria. And that way, you have, I don't want to call it, I don't want to use the word that comes to my head. You have these issues and challenges that we're continually facing because of so many years of neglect of investments, especially in terms of getting the right system to measure consumer consumption so that you can get accurately how much needs to be paid, how much is being consumed, how much money needs to be invested at the end of the day, and how consumers are ensuring that power that is generated along that value chain through the transmission lines into their houses or their homes are paid for so that the value chain can make more sense.
Before we get into the value chain and how it gets to the consumer, let's even understand what Nigeria's energy mix is really all about. That when you see the bulb come on, when you flip it on, what really is it? What really gives us power? What are we really on?
So so it comes from generation through the transmission, and then it goes into the distribution using different sets of equipment. So we can power generating plants, or using gas. We can use fuel oil. We can use water, which is what you call the hydro. And that's basically what we have in Nigeria, mostly gas and hydro. And today, with the influx of renewable energy, we're getting a lot more in terms of solar coming into the system. So when it comes through generation, then it goes through transmission. So you use high transmission wires or networks, like they call them. Some of them are or you call it a 3 kV or kilovolts transmission wires, which steps it down to 11 kilovolts transmission hours before it comes into the distribution network, and is now sent out through those 11 kVAs into your transformer, some 450, and then it steps it down to the power voltage, 220 volts, that you use between 220 and 240, which is the standard for Nigeria.
So once upon a time, it is said, those who experience it will tell you that power in Nigeria was stable. So if that was the case, is it a situation where Nigeria's population or energy need has outgrown what it used to be? That's why we are suffering, why we're in this situation now. It just can't go round.
I think the population growth and the energy needs of Nigerians has actually outgrown the investment in infrastructure in the power sector. And that is what has happened over time. And it's because like most things in Nigeria, everything had been centralized at a point in time. Government was investing in these things. And over the last 40, 45 years, 50 years, or 45 to 50 years, what we've seen is situations where that investment hasn't been regular. Equipment and infrastructure decay, no replacements. As we see it in power, we see it in oil and gas. And at the end of the day, what you then have is you have a number of obsolete equipment trying to power population that has grown from, was it 53 million in the 60s to about 5 or 6 times, about 5 times that. So that's what you see in Nigeria today. And until you start to put those investments back into it, and the reason why we can't put those investments is that government can't do this anymore. But at the same time, those investments are needed. And how do you plug, which areas do you need to plug those critical investments in so that you can get people paying for power so that that value chain is well oiled. If you don't have engine oil, then there's really nothing that you can do to the car.
So once upon a time, Nigeria's entire power generation system was entirely solely that in the control of the government.
Yes.
Now, is that still the case?
No. So the generating companies have set up as set up by the government. Most of them have been sold. Today, what they do is they go into PPP arrangements, public-private partnership arrangements to build new plants. At moment, we have between 12,000 to 15,000 megawatts of generation capacity, and you require a number of that. And most of it now today is gas. I think it's about 60, almost 70% of it requires gas, which is abundant in Nigeria. We just don't have the adequate investment in infrastructure to pull the gas. And also the pricing is another issue that those who are going to provide that gas are complaining about. Then there's hydro. There's no thermal, there's no nuclear, power generation facilities in Nigeria. And then the next part of it is the transmission. We've had transmission lines that have remained the same over the since we've had the transmission capacity in Nigeria, 5,000 megawatts since 1999. Has there been improvement in them? No. Have there been not improvement? Have there been expansions in terms of the transmission grid? Not much investment has come into that. Rather, the focus has been on government working with partners on the generation side to build that capacity. But like I said, if you build that capacity and there's no one that's going to take it off, it's just wasted investment or idle investments and loss of money. And then there's the distribution part, which you had 11 discos working under the government. All have been sold to private investors who have invested in them. Some have continually, most of them are continually putting new investments into it. But there is a weakness within the system, and the weakness is, how do you account for power that is generated, that is transmitted to the distribution companies and put into your home in order for you to be able to, receive the value from it and get paid for all that work that is done. And that is where the gap is. That's truly where the gap is. Because if you don't get the money from the consumers, then really the transmission and the generation companies really cannot do anything more than what currently I think they're doing, which is mostly, especially for the transmission, trying to maintain the lines and upgrade them to be able to carry more capacity, using more energy friendly systems and wiring like we have today.
So this in itself brings us to this phrase of what the government back in the days would talk about unbundling of that entire sector. It used to be NEPA, then from there, no, it used to be ECN, and then it migrated NEPA, then from NEPA, PACN, and then what we have, discos are what we've got right now. So at what point people will look at it and say, yes, you've unbundled. It means you now say you separated the different parts. You transmit, you generate, and then all of that. Why does it still seem like the investors that are attracted to Nigeria's power sector don't have the spirit of those who came in 2001 for Nigeria's telecom industry?
Brilliant question, Omar. So the unbundling, there are three phases. Like I said, there's generation, there's transmission, there's distribution. The unbundling process came in the generation and the distribution, meaning that assets were sold by the government, monies were paid for them, for both in the generation and in the distribution space. But the other thing about power is that there are two bits of power. There is the commercial bit of it, which people really have to pay for. And then there is a social bit of it, which people require so that they can get out of that level of poverty wherever they are. Because the more power you have, the better it is for you to be able to move on and do a number of things and so on, rather than looking for sources of how you're going to generate power. But that bit that falls into the transmission bit, and I understand why the federal government in 2013, when they did when they finally finished the unbundling process that started, I think it was in 2003, 2001, 2002, 2003. When it finished in 2013, 10 years later, they kept hold of that towards ensuring that they could improve on the infrastructure, expand the transmission grid. But 10 years down the line, that hasn't been done. Even the levels of maintenance hasn't been up to date with what the requirements of the growing population of Nigeria and the growing needs for power is. If we have some stability of power across Nigeria, I'm not even saying 24 hours, across board, if we can get stability of 14 to 16 hours on a daily basis, on the average for Nigerians, you would see a remarked difference in how the economic state and the economic life of Nigerians start to change. Why? Because people can rely on power. Things will invariably become cheaper because you're not using alternative sources of energy, which is usually more expensive to what's it called, commingle with power that's coming out of the grid.
All right, you're on to Lagos Talks 981. We'll get your thoughts across shortly. Just get them coming on to 0809-444-0981. What's the power situation? That we mean electricity supply in your area, and what can Nigeria do differently to come out of this dark tunnel before you see the light at the end of the tunnel that Uade talked about? We'll get your messages after now on 0809-444-0981. You can also catch a live stream of this conversation going on youtube.com/smooth981 Lagos. We are Smooth 98.1 FM. We're back in a bit, and then we begin to drift into safely what we can consider Nigeria's
designed to protect buildings
that's the same as what it has.
and water damage to your property.
So that's even related. I was even going, this is the next part of the conversation. Let's even understand what our energy appetite really is in Nigeria if we really even know it, like everything else about us?
Waterlogged areas. And water damage to your property.
Wake up
Okay.
Saturday morning and smell the coffee.
So we get into
Prepare
billing and
the unique
this their recent breaking off of the band and all of that. That's how we're going to take it.
Okay.
Yes. Come down to that.
me, Uade. Saturday morning from 7 o'clock. Now your breakfast is served.
Studio. We're smooth 98.1 FM. We're back. It's still Lagos Talks 981, and we get the conversation going with Uade Ahimie this morning, still talking electricity and what it's all about. So if you missed out on it, we've gotten on the way already, looking at the mix of energy and what the government has done so far in terms of unbundling to make it more effective. But it looks like the investors we're attracting don't have the spirit of those guys who came in 2001 for Nigeria's telecom sector. Really, but most
But I don't think I'll say that. I just think the challenges in power from previous issues that have been in the power sector is something that nobody really truly understood, and it's daunting. But at the end of the day, a huge amount of investments have gone into that sector. Someone just highlighted to me that the expansions have been done to 1,000 megawatts along the transmission grid. But like I said,
let's dig that because that's a message. El Como, we got a message, and El Como was the one who sent in that. It says transmission company of Nigeria has expanded the transmission grid to about 8,000 megawatts. However, the challenge is in the capacity itself, but issues surrounding the distances for uninhabited locations, as well as non-deployment of SCADA.
Which is a system to monitor it.
Yes, to harmonize drop in generation from different power stations scattered across Nigeria, which result in frequency instability and could result in partial or total grid collapse. That in itself is one topic we need to get into now. Well, let's see what this caller is about. Hello, good morning. Good morning to you. Name, location, power situation, and your band. F. All right.
companies, the people that the investors that bought this government properties that feel because we have the party in government, they don't even understand the enormity of the problem of the power industry. So they just feel they can actually get it very cheap from our party. So if they invested into it, now the reality has gone on. Okay. Then the people, those ones, they are the most terrible. some people here now, they don't even want to pay for power at all. And they are the one that actually complain that there's no power. They are the one that want it all. But we decide to even cut corners. Some of us, because we feel that okay, paying meters, to pick up someone complain that they don't want to pay meters because they think that when you are paying meters, you get to pay more. Some will now start cutting corners, they start having lights and all that. There are so many times I've had to report cases of people that are having in our area. So, for, like I said, distribution companies are so dangerous about some of these things. And I think this is real companies because some of them are not even going to give you credit. Right now, I'm having issue with the tech directly. I'm having issue with them now. They are telling me every time you call them from the remember one. I will understand what that is. They are not giving us.
Oh, Abbas. There we have Abbas. I thought let's return to you. Let's quickly let's squeeze this one in and then. Hello, good morning. Chika, good morning to you. Name, location now, of course, by the voice we can tell that's Chika. All right, Chika. Let's hear your thoughts. Mm. Good morning, Chika. So that's what we'll leave it now, and let's return to. But let's return to you. What issues arising? This takes us straight to the recent signing. Getting power of the executive list now and returning it to the states. Do you see this as the way to go and helping us find our way out of this dark tunnel to bring light at the end of the tunnel? And are states ready?
That's a great question. Are the states ready is really the question. But is it something that would help us get power that will help us get power into the localities as it's meant to be? Yes, I do think so. But are the states truly ready for it? How many states have their power policies? How many of them have been thinking about it? It's one thing to fight. You know, that's the beauty of life. I tell people that it's a war, and until the war is ended, you know, the journey hasn't finished. So you lose some battles just to win the war. What I have seen so far with the number of states and the clamor for, oh, remove it from exclusive to, or to concurrent, is, oh, let's just get it there. However, how prepared were you? I think it's about 3 or 4 states that have their policies, that are beginning to work on them and are going to start working on the kind of things that you need to do.
That question comes to mind because Enugu too is one of the very first states where the governor has also received that document. Yes. And
so at the end of the day, how are you working with the distribution companies? Now, because it used to be central, and when you look at some of the distribution companies, some of them feed 4, 5 states working together. Each state should be able to now start to look at it. How do you create new systems that will work for my state? How much investments do we need to bring into the transmission grid? You saw from Elkimo, who said, yeah, the grids have been expanded to 8,000 megawatts, but the distances sometimes are just killing. And when you don't have the right equipment, up-to-date wiring and all, you lose a lot of power in transition. And that's one thing that people need to understand. And through that, what we need to do is that, how are the states now looking at the discos and saying, okay, can we create new entities within my states? And you help us create those systems and manage them, where we start to bring in investments or local investors in places like transmission, and create grids within the states that are not too far away and can connect each other from the general grid lines. And these are the kind of investments that we need to start looking at, and states have to start thinking about, so that at the end of the day, your state becomes autonomous in terms of how they work with the current discos that work with them, and gradually transition into what will become a benefiting system for your state. But like I continue to say, while doing all that in terms of investing in infrastructure for transmission, you have to remember that it's the consumers who will pay. So are you going to invest in ensuring that while creating these new systems, you're putting metering in place that on like you said, on the SCADA system, which helps to monitor all these things? People who are stealing energy, what are the penalties for them? Are they being prosecuted? You don't need a special court. Just make sure that you have these things being done. And at the end of the day, once people become disciplined in terms of when people steal energy around you, you report them and they're apprehended, they are prosecuted in line with what the rules and the laws are within that state, then you will find out that people will better understand that if I have a prepaid meter, I won't leave home without turning out equipment I don't require.
So what in itself, it looks like we are, on all sides, we are being battered by people who, first, for crude oil, people steal oil from the pipelines. Here again, also for energy, people also steal energy from the grids. Well, and don't pay for it. That's money being lost.
Yeah, so like the last caller said, or the caller before that, we're all responsible. Do you understand? You see someone stealing energy and you don't report it. You say, oh man, why? But you see, once that energy is stolen, it's someone else's funds or someone else's opportunity to get energy that is not being utilized. Why? Because you're not paying for the energy that you're using. We need to reorient ourselves, and like over time, because the system had been broken. In trying to fix a broken system, there are a number of things that you need to do. Sometimes you need to recalibrate the system completely, which is what I think should be done, thinking from the consumer right down to how the generation companies will make their money. And a big part of that is investment in meters, and so on. And one last thing about meters that I would like to say is
that is part of discourse, and let's dwell on this. This discourse, they've got a lot we need to unpack for them. So let's just hold on. On the other side, you speak on the metering, and the discourse will come in, and we'll get more calls in. You're still on to Lagos Talks 981 on Smooth 98.1 FM. Stay tuned. Give us a call on 0201-448-9981. We as well will read your messages on 0809-444-0981.
passion for sports? Don't know how to turn it into income? With OneXBet, it might be possible than you think. Making from predictions and earn extra cash. Simply register on onexbet.ng and download the app. Use promo code EXPERT2024 to receive a chance to get a 300% bonus. 18 plus. Play responsibly. Express yourself. You're in control. Show your skills and stand a chance to win. Play with OneXBet. Hello people, this is Frank Donga and you're listening to Smooth Breakfast.
We're smooth 98.1 FM. It's Lagos Talks 981. Uade Ahimie is still here with me, and we're packing it now. Let's go to discos. The discos are seen to be very lazy investors who want quick return at the last end, and they seem to be more of the persons that the final consumers interact with. That's when you talk about where you were going to meter, transformer. So how come they want the quick return, the low-hanging fruits, but those necessary things like meter, transformer, they want people, they put people through pains to get it. Recently, I know of a community somewhere around Mushin where they have to pay to get their transformer repaired. How do we have that for people who are businessmen? We pay you, people would have to pay for facilities that you will use to get money off them. How right is this? What kind of business model is that?
Not the right business model, I beg to say, and not making excuses for anybody. But the fact remains that you require money to invest in a number of those things. And when the minister says there is really no money within that system, is actually speaking the truth. They can't even pay for the power that is being collected, talk less of now investing in infrastructure. Several interventions within the system over time, over the last 10 years. But a lot of that comes to the fact that those interventions can't really go that far. Exchange rate is an issue that has also hampered investments in the system, because when you're receiving in Naira, I remember when the transition was made from government to private, exchange rate started at 160 based on the contracts that were signed. Within 2-3 months of the next administration, the agreement was over 5 years, about between 5 and 10 billion was going to be invested in infrastructure, metering. I know some of the discos that had started their metering programs, which was going to be like a 5-year program. And then 2 years down the line, exchange rate jumps from 160 to 500 and boom, it never came back below 300. And these are issues that we need to deal with. Why? If you don't get all the consumers, customers are different. Consumers are those who pay. If you don't get customers to become consumers who pay for electricity, then you have that challenge. But like I said, between 2003 and 2015, a lot had been invested in the generation arm. I think where, like you're doing with the transition, I think some of the things that need to start happening on the distribution side is get people. I mean, government should work with the discos to see how you want to create a system. I know they created the mass metering system, MAP. However, if you're expecting consumers to pay for those meters, then it's going to be a far cry. How many meters can you bring in, and how many people can really pay for those meters at the cost that you're going? And at today's rate, I'm not even sure many people can pay for a one-phase meter, smart meter, as the case may be. So these are things that I think we need to start looking at and saying, how do we invest in the metering system? Government working, creating states working together, whether with the discos or new entities that they're going to form towards ensuring that there's a mass metering system in each state that provides you to a network of SCADA that you can monitor, which then means that in doing that over a period of time, what is going to happen is that you're going to realign everybody's house, everybody, because first and foremost, the meter doesn't belong to the consumer. The meter belongs to the household. So you can, this is another challenge that people are facing. I rent a house, I buy a meter. When I'm leaving, can I take it away? No, it's not right. And when you look at the
But-
billing, just a second, when you look at the billing system for metering or for electricity or power anywhere in the world, there's always a rental part of it. And a lot of that rental part goes into things like the metering to replace your meters when new meters and upgrade meters, maintenance of those things, maintenance of the general system. And if we don't do that and we expect people to pay, for instance, if I move to a home that is not mine and I have to pay 200,000 to get a meter, when I'm leaving, the beneficiary, is he going to pay me back that amount? And if the meter is one and it needs replacement, it means that the next beneficiary now has to pay the new price. So these are things we need to work into that system, and government should work with the discos, both states and local government, and create a new network of systems within the states that you can monitor efficiently and effectively and meter every household in Nigeria.
All right, we'll get back to that. Let's more calls in. Good morning. Good morning,
Good
Soji.
morning, sir.
All right, we're listening. That's Enugu.
Enugu.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Thank you very much, sir.
So that's where it lives it. So let's return to, yeah. The minister, let's return because now there are critical issues. The tariff has increased about 300% from what we see. And from the papers we picked up earlier on this morning, the Nigerian Labour Congress and the TUC, one of the conditions also they've laid now is that tariff has to go down. And we heard that even the House has also mandated the energy companies to revert. So this is where we are at the moment. And the minister talked about how we cannot subsidize energy for Nigerians because we are we're in trillions into that. So how can, where do we find the balance right now?
So
To subsidize or not to subsidize?
So what are you subsidizing? That's the first question you need to ask yourself. And like I said, we've always lived in a band system in Nigeria. What you have across the world in terms of energy is a band system. Do you understand? I remember I said at the beginning, energy is not cheap. But there is a social aspect of energy that must be fulfilled to take people out of poverty. Because when you have more light, you have less reliance on having to go and look for alternative sources of energy. That's one. The second part of it is that once you do that, the commercial aspect of it will be paid for by those who really desire to do that. Industries are willing to take power off the grid because at any point in time, you look at it anywhere in the world, power from your generation system that has been well set out is cheaper than when you have an influx of different power systems. Why? Diesel is expensive. If I use solar, I first have to put in that infrastructure in terms of cost. And at what cost is it coming to me? And these blended energy systems at the end of the day is more expensive. That's because I have to do it by myself. Secondly, on that part is because we are almost, I don't know how many households we are in Nigeria, but we say that we have about 12 million less privileged households in Nigeria. That's 12 million households. And if I take one household as having one home that requires a meter, that's 12 million meters that you need to put in the system. So you can imagine when you put those 12 million meters into that system, what it does and how it changes the system, because they will now be able to, rather than be thinking about how I'm going to sleep with cold air in the night, I can go out and do business, and I can even do some small businesses from my home. That's on that part. So like I said, for me, in my own opinion, where you should start from is turn the pyramid of this power sector from the generation, transmission into distribution. Turn it around. It's an inverted pyramid kind of system for me. How do you ensure that the customers will become consumers and will pay for it? One good way is invest in meters, subsidize the aspect of the metering over a period of time where people will pay from the meter, from the energy that is bought, from the rental packages that go. The distribution companies will make sure that those monies are being collected and the amounts that need to be remitted to government in terms of the grants or the loans that have been provided for them, along with the interest, and still make a tiny bit of it towards maintenance, is done. That way, you now start to see that when the money goes into the system, you upgrade transmission. States to start looking at transmission networks within localities. How do you build that? How do you connect to the wider range that comes from different parts of where energy is coming into small networks that would bring more power into the system? And once you do that, then you find out that the generation companies are beginning to get the kind of monies for them to improve and expand their generation capacity.
Let's go back to Soji's question in about a minute. Let's see how we can sum that up. He talked about how, in summary, just to paraphrase his question, where states now, by virtue of the signing of that bill and democratizing energy now, sending it back to the people where it rightly belongs, it's simply more like looking around you, what you can generate power with from your area. Now that takes us back to Enugu. Coal, it's not seen as a clean means of providing energy from what the international community is saying. But with Enugu right now as a model and being the coal state, you see that states can begin to decide how they decide to generate.
And let's not forget that there are still countries in the world that use coal, and how you make it cleaner is the issue. New technology, new investment in infrastructure that would help it make it cleaner, that would generate more electricity for you. Like I said, if we can get the system working and the money is coming in, we can start to get 12,000, 15,000 megawatts, and then we start to step up. 200, if the mass of people are not paying for power, then you don't get that money flowing down the value chain.
Really a whole lot to unpack, but let's see. Power matters will generate. I've got Gerard from Ikoyi letting us know here. The Nigerian government said that people, especially business, should switch to CNG generators to power their homes and businesses. Do you think that is an effective strategy? Uade?
I don't think so. I think when you have the system from generation working more efficiently, it is cheaper any day than getting people to power their businesses with CNG. Who pays for that infrastructure? When they pay to build those CNG generating plants, what happens? The pricing of that, the cost of it goes into what? The end produce that comes to the consumer. The consumer still pays, rather than get more people to be on the grid and get more electricity and start to do things on their own.
It's still Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1 FM. Focus this morning is on energy, electricity especially, but we're coming back for the final wrap of the conversation. So let's be sure we get your call onto 0201 448 9981. We can as well read more messages also on 0809 444 0981. We're Smooth 98.1 FM. Love music, love life, love electricity. So,
Wow, you have made me talk plenty today.
sorry, but that's what when if you talk about energy, there are some topics you just realize that if it comes to mind, you just realize that Uade will be this person who will be able to break these figures down. You're able to crunch those figures. That's why one of the things about when you share your insight on these issues with us. So it's always a delight to have you around.
And the discussion has been healthy. It's not people who just call and be abusing everybody.
That's because it affects. I think if people can relate to the issues, and if you can walk around.
For me, if you invest in metering, if government puts the subsidy in metering in the short term.
Sorry.
High-strength cement, expertly formulated for all interior and external use in waterlogged areas. And water damage to your property.
We're Smooth 98.1 FM. We're back. It's the final half of the conversation this morning on Lagos Talks 981.
Is it half of me? Final 2 minutes.
Final 2 minutes now. The final stretch of the conversation. But then that's what it feels like when you got conversation as smooth as this and getting everyone, begin to chime in, and because it affects everyone, it pinches at that point. But we must begin to also, as we talk about the cost of providing energy in Nigeria. What's the implication of this long drawn, lingering power outages, in terms of economic, social, and personal? Walk us through that.
It's huge. Why? Because time I should be using for more productive things, I'm using it to look for power. It's been extremely hot this Harmattan season. I'm not sure I even saw Harmattan once.
Summer.
Yeah, so I saw summertime. It's been extremely hot. No power. People can't really get the best. You can't get best out of the people. I was listening to something yesterday, and they're asking those who are working in factories with the machines that are working with the generators blasting in your ears. People are more prone to health related issues, which is incidentally another cost that could come out of it, and so on. I was at the session, I think it was a month ago, and we're still talking about this power. If we get, like I said, if we get 16 to 18 hours of power on the average to every household in Nigeria, we would reduce the cost of doing business in this country by about 20 to 30%. Why? Those who do things from home. I give you an example. If you sell pure water, what happens? You have power regularly. Sometimes the water is frozen. So people buy it and know that, oh, okay, I like they say, ice water tuture, and then it goes on. Now, once the money starts to come in, I can invest in a new fridge. I can expand and I can go on. So just doing that helps you first and foremost improve the economic system. Those who sell things on via social media, via e-commerce, have enough time rather than running the generator and then shutting down for some parts. That's one bit of it. Secondly, production capacity will go up for major industries because they're getting enough adequate power and it's going to be cheaper than blended power systems. And these are the things that we need to look at. So getting it right is the most important thing. And for me, I think to get it right is you must turn that pyramid upside down. You must start from the consumer, not a customer who is not paying, from the consumer, meaning that the government should work with the discos, with the gencos, with the transmission companies in terms of metering everything that has to do with power so that you can actually account for every single unit. Part of it will be lost which is standard, which shouldn't be more than between 2 to 5% of it. But you can account for every single kobo as it comes out of generation right into the home, and then the money flows back in that same way.
So the idea, there's been this dichotomy of, should we keep a national grid, or we don't even really deserve to have, we've outlived that existence of a national grid. Do you agree with it?
Not really. And we must be very careful. What I think should happen is the national grid is there. Are you with me? With states working together now with the federal government or having rights to creating their own grid systems with it. How do you plug into it? And let's remember one thing, the necessity for having a national grid or a national grid system for me is this, where states are beginning to utilize the expectations of the bill better. What then happens is that if there are major issues within the system, the federal government can quickly step in and say, okay, don't worry, we'll provide you some assistance in terms of funding because you've done so much and so on, and let those things be managed within the system. So that national grid creates a system that helps you manage the system that is already in existence, how you plug into it, how you maintain those things, and then taking away so much responsibility from each state, and each state can start to account for how much money comes in and how much money should go to the federal government in terms of revenues that come in from all the systems that come in. But if we throw out the national grid and say every state for its own, if there is a major collapse within the systems along the state, are we going to run to the federal government? The federal government tell you, I have nothing to do with
your
that.
own.
Yeah, on your own. So let's be careful about that. The federal government still has a huge part to play, especially in terms of regulations across board and interstate. How do you sell power across each state, irrespective of the agreements and so on and so forth? Because like I said, there is a social aspect which we must fulfill to get more people out of poverty. And there is a commercial aspect, which we must also fulfill to make sure that those who need to pay for the power can pay for it, and it goes along into that system.
There's a recurring thread in this conversation, how you see, and when, back in the days, when a lecturer keeps talking about this thing, you know that area of concentration, at some point, we know what to expect. This idea of power being able to liberate people from poverty, it's been a recurring trend since we began this conversation. You're heavy on that.
Yes, I am. Why? See, Omas, let's use a child that goes to school. If you have power to sleep, you sleep better. You sleep on time, you sleep better. You wake up healthier, you go to school, you learn better, and then you come back home. If it's during the day when you're not really active and all, when you're going to play that there's no power, there's no big deal because you're outside, the breeze is blowing you. But once you come back home and there's no power, you have a bath. Sometimes yesterday I had my bath like 4 times because I was working from home.
Well, you were dirty. You were really dirty.
No, I was sweating because there was no power. Even sitting outside, the heat was unbearable. And these are the things. So it makes you, one, extremely tired. Waking up the next morning is a challenge. Even doing your normal chores is a major issue. But at the end of the day, when you do that, what you find is, one, you find a healthier society because they are well rested well in terms of not choking or sweating all through the night and having soaked pillows or soaked mats, as the case may be. And then those people become even more productive into the system. I get to work, I'm not trying to sleep because I get in and then they are using alternative power in the office. I first sleep on the floor for like 2 hours before my session starts. These are the things that we need to do. Power, at least 16 to 18 hours every day, will reduce the cost of, in my own opinion, would drop the cost of production would drop. And once cost of the production drops, you know how it affects. It goes down the value chain of the inflation chain.
Uade, it's been a very enlightening session with you this morning, but let's see if we can just throw in a few messages in as we wrap it up now. Abbas sent in a message, but then that Tanzanian story.
Yeah, it was a flood.
It was a flood. It wasn't as if, so, hey, but the infrastructure was there anyway too.
That's the most important. The infrastructure was there.
Okay, but it goes on to say they should let people be able to buy prepaid meters from manufacturers in the open market. This will even bring down the price of meter instead of just leaving it to the hands of the discos who prefer the estimated billing system. I see Pastor Dakpo's message here also. Thank you so much. And for everyone who tuned in this morning, we appreciate you greatly. We're Smooth 98.1 FM. Keep it locked here. My name is Omatseye Atsenuwa. Good morning.